During these troubled times on our planet, there's an awful amount of hatred, discrimination, and violence going on, especially surrounding a small stretch of land of great importance to some of the world's largest faiths, a region known to 60% of the world's population as the Holy Land. However, what bothers me more than that is historical and cultural ignorance. As the ancient home of Abraham, Moses, and Jesus, Israel and Palestine are two nations deeply enriched with historical, cultural, and religious significance, although today the area is deeply divided along ethnic and sectarian lines. Meaning, in order to gain a full understanding of the region and its modern people, we're going to have to look at its history, a topic that I've seen countless commentators and even academics purposefully distort in order to suit their modern political agendas. Technically, no one knows for sure who the first inhabitants of the Holy Land were, but needless to say, the original indigenous people are long dead, considering modern humans have lived in the area for at least 40,000 years, and archaic hominid subspecies even longer than that. The people we know from modern history are the ancient Semites, specifically various Canaanite tribes, including the Phoenicians, Edomites, Moabites, and various Proto-Israelite tribes. According to biblical tradition, the people of the region are descended from Shem, giving rise to the Semites. He was one of the sons of Noah, along with Ham and Japheth, and the biblical patriarch of all followers of Abrahamic faith, Abraham, originally had two sons himself by the names of Isaac and Ishmael. Although Jewish and Islamic sources differ greatly on the exact nature and relationship between Abraham, his sons, and their mothers, yes, both sources agree they had different mothers, making them half-siblings, Isaac's descendants are considered to have become the tribes of Israel, and Ishmael's descendants are believed to have become the tribes of Arabia. Of course, this is just the biblical narrative and hence a massive simplification and likely metaphorical in some ways. It does serve as a helpful allegory regarding the historic and modern relationship between these nations, and early relationships between Jews and Muslims were not good, to say the least. In biblical sources, the 12 tribes of Israel, including Asher, Benjamin, Dan, Ephraim, Gad, Issachar, Judah, Manasseh, Naphtali, Reuben, Simeon, and Zebulun, were first united by King Saul, followed later by King David and Solomon, around 1,000 years before Christ, into the kingdom of Israel, united by their language, Hebrew, and their religious beliefs, unique to the region for being monotheistic, as opposed to the polytheistic faiths practiced by other related Semitic peoples, such as the Arameans, Assyrians, and other Syriac peoples, as well as Arabs and Ethiopian Semitic groups like the Tigrinya and Amhara, and more distantly related to the ancient Egyptians, as well as the Amazigh or Berbers of the Maghreb. The Israelites went through many periods of conquest and rule by various foreign powers, including the Egyptians, Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians, and Hellenic dynasties, and there's this music video called "This Land Is Mine" that does a really great job of summing up how the region has swapped hands between so many different nations. And although Jews faced exile and expulsion many times, before the Roman period, the ethnic makeup of the region did not change too significantly. By the time that the region had been incorporated as a Roman province, Roman Senator Tacitus estimated that around 6,000 to 10,000 Roman soldiers lived in Judea during the 1st century AD, out of a total population of about 1 to 2 million, of whom 80 to 90% were Jewish, with the largest minorities being Samaritans, Greeks, Arameans, Gassanids, and other Arabs. Hebrew was the language traditionally spoken by the Israelites, and later the Judeans and Samaritans, although they also spoke Aramaic, Greek, and in the case of the Judean Roman elite, Latin. Diaspora groups also developed their own Hebrew-influenced languages and dialects of other foreign languages. It was during this early period of conquest and extensive colonization by the Romans that the inhabitants began to solidify their religious and national identity into Judaism and Jews, and many of the laws, practices, traditions, and holidays were established and codified during this period into the Torah and Talmud. After the Jewish revolt, only 250,000 to 500,000 Jews remained in Judea, therefore making up about 50 to 60% of the Judean population, with similar numbers either killed, sold into slavery, or scattered throughout the Mediterranean, predominantly Anatolia, Greece, Egypt, Italy, and Iberia. But a significant number would also relocate outside the empire and join existing Jewish communities in Arabia, Yemen, Iran, Ethiopia, and India, or create entirely new ones. The number of Jews in the region would remain relatively stable at a few hundred thousand for the duration of the Roman and Byzantine rule for hundreds of years until the Arab invasions of the 7th century, after which the Jewish population dropped significantly. The Jewish population took another major hit during the Crusader period a few centuries later, which initially saw massive numbers of Jewish civilians slaughtered at the hands of the Crusaders, especially during the sack of Jerusalem. However, a significant number did remain, amounting to about 10% of the population of the Crusader states. After the defeat of the last of the Crusaders, Arabs became a plurality in the region once more, although it remained incredibly religiously and ethnically diverse. Now, who exactly were the Philistines, and why are the Arab inhabitants described as Palestinian, or Philistini as they call themselves, showing the obvious etymological origins of the word, and they are indeed related, although not ethnically. The Philistines were one of the few non-Semitic tribes living around the Holy Land in the Sinai Peninsula, although no one knows their origin for certain because their language and nation died out nearly 3,000 years ago. It is possible that they originated from migrants from other parts of the Mediterranean, most likely Greece. They were an embittered rival and enemy of the people of Israel and were located around the present-day Gaza Strip, only encompassing an even larger area, including Ashkelon, Ashdod, and other cities in modern Israel. Although their tribe was certainly long dead by the time Judea became a Roman province, the region was renamed to punish the Jewish rebellion, becoming the province of Palestina and Syria-Palestina. The region retained the name Palestine under Byzantine, Arab, and Ottoman rule, and hence all people in the region, regardless of religion, were Palestinians. The Zionist movement started to gain traction among Jewish academics and other sympathetic parties around the 1800s, although by this time Jews made up only a small minority of the entire population of Palestine, a community of less than 10,000 people, concentrated mostly in Jerusalem. However, waves of Jewish migration began to arrive from within the Ottoman Empire, starting with Jews from Syria, Egypt, Anatolia, the Balkans, Greece, and later Yemen, Germany, and Eastern Europe. Jews grew from only 3% of the population in 1800 to 10% of the population by 1900, with an Arab-Muslim majority followed by Arabic-speaking Christians and other minorities including Druze, Turks, Armenians, Greeks, Latins, Assyrians, and others. A large number of Arabs, mainly from neighboring Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt, also migrated to Palestine during the Ottoman and British periods. However, unlike with Jewish migrants, they were never a majority of the community, and foreign-born Arabs made up only a small proportion of all Arabs in the region by the last census in Mandatory Palestine in 1945. So implying that most Palestinian Arabs are descended from recent migrants in the same way that Israeli Jews are is simply untrue. When Britain issued the Balfour Declaration in 1917, declaring their support for the Jewish homeland in Palestine, this was at a time when the region only had a Jewish population of around 100,000, and the declaration was largely a recognition and reaction to growing anti-Semitism in Europe, often violent. Hence, the relocation of Europe's large Jewish population of 10 million was a priority to avoid potential bloodshed and conflict. Or perhaps it was simply to get rid of them. However, like any major world power, the British Empire was not monolithic in their aspirations and not only attempted to appease the growing Zionist element, but also the population of the Arab world, of whom Britain controlled a significant portion. During the interwar period, the British actually began restricting immigration of Jews to Mandatory Palestine, and the early Jewish guerrilla fighters known as Lehi and other paramilitary groups had to fight them for their independence, beating back the British as well as several different Arab armies. Before the time of Israeli independence in 1948, Arabs still outnumbered Jews in the region at a rate of about 2 to 1. But the Israelis had been far more organized and determined in their fight for independence when compared to the Arabs, and were instead looking to join a larger united Arab superstate, as the British had also offered in exchange for rebelling against the Ottoman Empire in World War I. After independence, Israel managed to take not only the area designated to them under the UN as a part of an unsuccessful partition plan, but also nearly all of the Galilee and Negev Desert, two regions with large Arab populations, and as a result, around 700,000 Arab civilians vacated the region that became the new state of Israel, although the exact number and reasons behind their expulsion are heavily debated, whether it be due to forced relocation, fear of the advancing Israeli army, orders from other Arab armies, and other factors. It depends on who you ask. The defeat of the Arab armies multiple times at the hands of the nascent Israeli state was not only a source of national humiliation, but also led to a major amount of disdain for their own governments, leading to a gradual abandonment of pan-Arabism as a major political force, since Israel not only separates both halves of the Arab world, but also the Islamic world as a whole, being the only land connection between the Asian and African halves. As could be expected, this led to a massive wave of anti-Semitism throughout the Arab and Islamic world, resulting in a similar number of Jews living in Arab countries, around 800,000, to have to flee their nations, many of whom had lived in their respective countries for centuries before departing, or returning, as they say, to Israel. Inadvertently, this was a massive boost to the Israeli labor pool, economy, and strength of the Jewish nation in an extremely short amount of time, and also greatly increased the standard of living of these new immigrants. Conversely, the Arab Palestinians expelled from Israel have done less than prosper, bouncing around from nation to nation, leading to massive socio-political unrest. The PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or PLO, the largest armed Palestinian wing in the diaspora at that time, was expelled from Jordan after an unsuccessful attempt to overthrow the Jordanian monarchy, and also faced expulsion in Lebanon due to their role in the civil war, as well as incurring the wrath of neighboring Israel. And Palestinians were even expelled from Kuwait after the first Gulf War, since the PLO had aligned themselves with Saddam Hussein during the Iraqi invasion of the country. To heavily simplify the numerous post-independence Arab-Israeli conflicts, the main three regarding foreign powers have been the Six-Day War in 1967, in which Israel gained control over the entirety of the Palestinian territories, the Sinai Peninsula and the Golan Heights, the Yom Kippur War in 1973, in which Egypt and Syria unsuccessfully attempted to regain their lost territory. However, Israel later returned the Sinai to Egypt in return for a peace deal with Anwar Sadat, which directly led to his assassination for negotiating with Israel. More recently, there has been the 1982 invasion of southern Lebanon by Israel in order to drive out hostile militia groups, and Israel continued to occupy part of the region to prop up the Christian militia group of the South Lebanon Army up until the year 2000, which resulted in the region being overrun and effectively controlled by the notorious Shia militia group, whose name I'm not sure if I can say. Israel still retains nominal control over most of the Palestinian territories, leading to a massive number of Jewish settlements to expand on the other side of the Green Line, or the internationally recognized border between Israel and Palestine. There are nearly 800,000 Jewish settlers in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem, and Area C, known in Israel as Judea and Samaria, and they are rapidly growing, fueled by a youthful and fertile population with a large Orthodox component. These settlements have been a source of massive controversy within Israel and internationally due to a rise in conflicts between Jewish settlers and the 3 million local Palestinian Arabs who are relegated to a fraction of the land and lack the same rights as the settlers who have full protection as citizens under Israeli law. Today, the entire region of Israel and Palestine, including the Golan Heights, Gaza Strip, and West Bank, have a population of over 15 million. And although the literal wars that have occurred and are still ongoing are obviously important, one of the primary concerns for the Israeli government and public is the demographic war, as Israel maintains its Jewish demographic majority through granting Jews around the world citizenship and allowing them to migrate, a process known as aliyah, and a remarkably high fertility rate is seen among nearly all Jewish subgroups, but is most pronounced in the ultra-Orthodox Haredi Jews, who have 6 to 7 children per family on average, although this has dropped in recent decades. So, although throughout much of the 20th century, the Arab fertility rate in the region was much higher than the Jewish fertility rate, leading to a higher natural growth rate and leading to the two groups to be nearly equal in size in the present day, the Jewish fertility rate has now surpassed that of Palestinian Arabs, meaning coupled with Aliyah, the Jewish-Israeli population, including that of the settlers, is expected to greatly grow in the 21st century, as is the Arab population, but not quite at the same rate as a whole. The Israeli Jewish population of over 7.3 million is divided into many different groupings based on regional, linguistic, and theological lines. The largest subgroup of Jews are actually those who are secular, known as Hiloni, who may identify as Jews simply out of tradition and respect for their communities, however rarely, if ever, engage in religious ceremonies, and they make up around 40% of the Israeli Jewish population, followed by 29% Mesorti, who identify as religious, but not too religious, if you know what I mean. The Deiti are religious and more conservative than the Mesorti. Think of them like the evangelicals in America, and make up around 12%, and around 19% and growing are Haredi, or ultra-Orthodox, who are exactly that. Somewhat akin to the Amish in the United States in terms of their devotion to scripture, however, the Haredi still use modern technology to some extent. The Jewish population is also divided into roughly 3 main groupings based on ethnic or cultural affinity and geographic origins, and all of them have radically different histories and stories, with 45% of Israeli Jews being Ashkenazi, those who originate from Northern, Central, and Eastern Europe. 34% are Mizrahi, whose name means Eastern, and they originate from Arabia, Mesopotamia, Iran, the Caucasus, and Central Asia. 15% are Sephardi, those who originate from Spain and were scattered to Northern Africa, Southeastern Europe, Anatolia, and Latin America, and around 5% have other unique origins, including over 200,000 Beta Israel Jews from Ethiopia, 120,000 Jews from South Asia, including the B'nai Israel, Kochinim, B'nai Ephraim, B'nai Menashe, and many other groups from around the world. One question many people have regarding the modern people of Israel is whether there is such a thing as a Palestinian Jew or Arab Jew. This is a matter of semantics, really, as before the declaration of the State of Israel, all Jews in Palestine were considered Palestinians, and Jews were referred to as such outside of the region. And whether or not a Mizrahi Jewish person living in an Arab country would be considered Arab or not is also a matter of debate, since Jew describes both an ethnicity and religion, and Jews living in Arab countries mostly spoke heavily Hebraized versions of Arabic, known as Judeo-Arabic. This is a similar pattern witnessed in numerous other Jewish communities around the world, where they speak a dialect of the local language with Hebrew loanwords and often written in the Hebrew alphabet or Ketav Ashuri, such as Yiddish, Judeo-Persian, Judeo-Malayalam, Judeo-Spanish, or Ladino, and many others. One could even argue that American Jews followed this pattern, since many Yiddish and Hebrew words have entered into mainstream American lexicon, mostly stemming from New York. Although the majority of Israeli Jews today are native-born, nearly all have recent origins from some other country, and at least 13% of Israeli Jews have origins in the Maghreb, mainly Morocco, Tunisia, and Algeria, while 18% have origins from other Arab countries, mainly Yemen and Iraq. 8% come from other parts of the Middle East, including Iran, Turkey, Kurdistan, and Afghanistan. 3% come from sub-Saharan African countries, mainly Ethiopia, and 2% come from other parts of Asia, mostly India. A whopping 44% of all Israeli Jews originate from Eastern European countries and the former Soviet Union, with a huge number coming from Poland, Romania, Ukraine, Russia, the Caucasus, and Uzbekistan. 11% originate from Western European countries, including Germany, France, England, and a growing number come from North America and other English-speaking countries. And lastly, 3% come from Latin America, mainly Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, Chile, Venezuela, and many others. As you could tell, Israeli Jewish society is an extremely diverse hodgepodge of countless different cultures, languages, and influences from all over the world. And because of this, around a quarter of the Jewish population is mixed to a certain degree between two or more groups, and this percentage is only rising due to the massive increase in marriages from different cultures. Instead of the traditional ethnic and geographic divisions, Israeli society is becoming increasingly stratified into different linguistic groups, with native Hebrew speakers now making up the largest segment of the population at around half of the total. While the next largest is Arabic at 20%, which is spoken by the large Arab minority, followed by Russian at over 11%, which is largely spoken by migrants not only from Russia, but the entire former Soviet Union. Judeo-Arabic dialects are spoken by 3%, mainly from migrants from Yemen, Iraq, and elsewhere in the Arab world, and around 1 to 2% speak Yiddish, mainly by older migrants from Germany and Central Europe. French, spoken by those from France and former French colonies in the Maghreb and elsewhere. Judeo-Iranian languages, spoken by those from Iran, Azerbaijan, and Central Asia. English, spoken by those from the UK, USA, and the rest of the Anglosphere. Romanian, Spanish, Ladino, spoken by those from Southern Europe and Anatolia. And Polish, while the remaining 5% speak Amharic, Judeo-Georgian, German, and many, many other languages. Among the 7.3 million Arabic-speaking inhabitants of Israel and Palestine, around 92% are Muslim, the vast majority of whom are Sunni, with a small minority of Shias, Alawites, and followers of Ahmadiyya. However, in the diaspora, minority groups like Christians are heavily overrepresented, making up 20% of all overseas Palestinians. Around 7% of Arabs in Israel and 2.1% overall follow the Druze faith. 8% of Arabs in Israel, 2% in Palestine, and 3.4% in the entire region are Christian, mainly Greek Catholic, Greek Orthodox, Latins, Maronites, with smaller numbers of Armenians, Assyrians, and other native Christians. Although the number of Palestinian Christians has been decimated over the centuries and disproportionately affected throughout the entire Arab-Israeli conflict, there are still roughly 250,000 Arab Christians in the region, as well as 30 to 40 Messianic Jews, who are Jews who believe in Jesus but still retain many Jewish practices, and many other Christian migrants from other Asian countries such as the Philippines or African countries such as Ethiopia, but a growing minority are Christian Zionists from the Western world, predominantly the United States. There are also smaller minorities of native-born Turks who remain from the Ottoman era, the Domari or Middle Eastern Gypsies related to the Romani of Europe, a small number of Circassians, and other migrants from nearly every continent. One of the smallest minorities in the area are the Samaritans, a sect that split from Judaism many thousands of years ago and once made up a sizable chunk of the population, yet today have been reduced to only 1,000 people, although the community has been growing as of late, and a large number of the surrounding Arabs and Jews are Samaritans who have converted or married into these communities. Additionally, a minority of Arab Palestinians in the region may have varying degrees of African or European ancestry as a result of centuries of the Arab and Ottoman slave trade, and although those of European descent have largely assimilated into the overall population, those of African descent are more visibly distinguishable and are scattered throughout the region. It's also worth noting that, of course, a large number of Arab inhabitants of the region, either Muslim or Christian, are likely to have been descended from the ancient Jews who converted to those religions. It's even been speculated that some of the Christian Ghassanids who lived on the fringes of the Byzantine Empire may have been absorbed into the other Arabic-speaking Christian communities, but this is uncertain. As a result, there are many different ways to divide Israeli and Palestinian societies, whether it be on ethnicity, race, religion, geographic origin, culture, language, and I haven't even gotten started on the political divides, which would probably take an entire video on its own. The video is much longer than usual because I couldn't do the history justice without discussing the demographics, and couldn't do the demographics justice without discussing the history. This makes it extremely difficult to say for certain who the native or indigenous people of this region are, and this was reflected in a recent poll that I conducted, finding public opinion to be surprisingly nuanced and hinged to reality, unlike some more hysterical takes on the subject. As of 2024, Israel continues to de facto control nearly the entire West Bank except for the small pockets under the Palestinian Authority, and it's likely to occupy Gaza for the foreseeable future. So all we can hope is that the two will somehow learn to get along, but knowing the bloody and violent history in the region and the uniquely hostile relation between them, this will be difficult, requiring a process of reconstruction, de-radicalization, and normalization in the region. Let me know your thoughts on the troubling yet interesting history behind the region of the Holy Land and what your solution to the conflict would be. Within reason, of course. It's going to be interesting to see how these different groups evolve and interact in the upcoming decades, as the already densely populated region is set to explode exponentially in the coming century. So as always, this has been Mason. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.